Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
Austin, welcome back. We are officially 1 week into September. We've had several months off here due to a combination of busy schedule and the fact that there wasn't really much to talk about with all these new protocols for the coronavirus outbreak around the country. Training camps were pretty much closed off to the public and to the media as well, so there really wasn't a lot to talk about. The preseason games were canceled, so we're going right into week one without anything besides just a slightly extended training camp. So with that in mind, how did this whole preseason process feel to you? Because it really didn't feel like a typical preseason to me.
It didn't feel the same, and it was just kind of boring. I know a lot of more casual fans don't like the preseason. I love the preseason because it lets me see some guys that have performed in camp, but it was just all so different because we didn't really hear about the guys that performed in camp. There is one that actually did make the roster that we'll talk about later, that I had heard stuff that he was doing stuff, but it wasn't the same because we didn't have all the media angles really, because there just wasn't that many people left to see it and record it, so it felt different. It didn't feel like training camp.
One additional thing that had to be taken into account is that a lot of these NFL coaches and front offices made decisions as far as their roster makeup. They were going to go with guys that they felt safer with, guys that they felt more comfortable with. The Steelers were no exception in this case, and it's unfortunate, as you pointed out early on in this process, Austin, is that you felt mostly for those undrafted free agents, those guys who are looking for a chance just to get a shot, and a lot of them did not. For instance, the Baltimore Ravens had 16 straight seasons with at least one undrafted free agent rookie that made their opening day roster, or at least their initial roster, And for the first time in 16 years, that was not the case. And like you mentioned, the Steelers did have one of those players, but it's few and far between. A lot of the rosters throughout the NFL have been made up of guys that have either been there and done that, or older guys that have at least have a higher round pedigree as opposed to these unproven players.
Yeah, it was tough all around because not only was there not that many undrafted free agents making rosters this year, players that got cut weren't getting jobs as often on another team. If one person gets cut, is getting a job on another team, it means someone else is getting cut. But we saw the lowest amount of pickups after a 53-man cut-down day, and I think someone said 43 years. There was only 17 transactions on the day after a 53-man roster cut-down day. Steelers were one of those teams, and they made two claims, but it's just there weren't a lot of them this year. It's a different year.
So why don't we transition into talking about that Steelers roster then? So they did have a few changes between their initial 53-man roster and the roster that they have as of 10:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on September 7th here. But to start off with the big things to talk about is first and foremost the quarterback room. The original three was Ben Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, and Devlin Hodges, the same three guys that played under center last season. But there was a change a couple days ago. The Steelers put in a waiver claim for Joshua Dobbs, a quarterback that they drafted a few years ago, and actually made their opening day roster a year ago. But he was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 5th-round pick at the time, which ended up being a great deal because the Steelers then used that pick in a trade to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. And obviously that trade worked out well for the Steelers. And now Dobbs is back. And with that, the Steelers released Devlin Hodges, and we'll talk about Hodges later. But Dobbs returning, I think, really helps strengthen the quarterback room, and that's the best-case scenario when you trade a player like that away for a pick.
And this was one of the best scenarios ever. I was really happy with this. I thought Josh Dobbs should come back. And what Josh Dobbs brings is not only a very smart football player back to the team that's already aware of how the system works for the most part, with very probably minimal changes other than just having to learn like the specific plays in the playbook. Not only that, but he gives you a better scout team quarterback for when you're playing Lamar Jackson twice a year, which is just a small bonus. That's obviously not why they signed him. They signed him for familiarity in a year where there's not a lot of tape on guys and stuff. And it seems like a good move, but I was especially liking that because he projects more as a Lamar Jackson type. Not saying Josh Dobbs is Lamar Jackson or as good as him. It's just that do you remember the quarterback the Steelers picked up before they played Ravens?
I don't remember the guy's name, but I do remember that they had to sign someone specifically to the practice squad for that week. And I think they may have signed him the second time. I don't remember if they did or not, but they signed someone. I can't remember his name. I'll have to look that up at some point. But yeah, they didn't have someone on their roster that could even attempt to duplicate what he does, and Dobbs gives them that. And obviously, like you said, he's familiar with the quarterback room, and he provides, I think, a nice depth piece as the third quarterback.
Oh yeah, sure, and easily, and that's the point I want to highlight is that the Steelers obviously value Lamar Jackson's quarterback play so much that they went through a week of just adding a guy that was somewhat similar in his skill set that was nowhere near as good, just had his type skill set, and so I just want to highlight that with Josh Dobbs.
The guy's name was Taron Christian.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I remember now.
I don't remember what school he went to, but that I do remember that's the name. But he was an athletic rookie, is how he was described by the Pittsburgh Tribune Review at the time. So that was the first notable one. The second notable signee, if you will, was Sean Davis, the former second-round pick back in 2016. He left to sign with the newly named Washington football team for a 2-year, $2 million deal, but was released from that contract. And the Steelers, again, favoring familiarity, brought him back in, and he's expected to be the backup safety to both Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmunds. You know, he's played both free and strong safety in his career in Pittsburgh, and I think that depending on Edmunds' play, Davis could actually challenge to be the strong safety, at least to primarily a starter, depending on Edmunds' play, because even though he had his ups and downs, I'd say his peaks were higher than what Edmunds has shown thus far.
Yeah, Rashawn Davis's rookie season was so promising, and then he wasn't as bad as Artie Burns, but it just never after that it was always downhill, just always maybe average, it was just never that great. But him coming back as a depth piece is great here. It's one of the great transactions. I think that because of this, because of what the Steelers did this year, they're probably going to make a rule about this. But one of the coolest things about this transaction for the Steelers is that the Steelers were supposed to get a 6th-round comp pick, or were projected, I'm sorry, they weren't supposed to, projected a 6th-round comp pick for Sean Davis signing with the Redskins. With the $2 million guarantee they paid, that the Redskins paid, and then him coming back to Pittsburgh, the Steelers are still on track, even though they got him back, to get that 6th-round comp pick, unless they're told otherwise in a special scenario. At the moment, they're still supposed to get a 6th-round comp pick for a guy they quote-unquote lost, and that's now back on the roster. So I feel like that's going to be something patched. It seems like a loophole in the rules. I thought that was very cool about this whole transaction because the Steelers get to keep a 6th-round comp pick and get Sean Davis back.
Yeah, and it bolsters the safety room, again, that whole familiarity factor. And it also boots a guy in Curtis Riley who has played defensive snaps in the NFL, including for the New York Football Giants, who the Steelers will see in Week 1. That pushes him to the practice squad. So a position that the Steelers appeared to be very thin at just a couple months, a few weeks ago even, just a month ago, now has become one of the strongest parts of the team, I'd say. Or deepest, at least.
Yeah, it's very deep. I think Terrell Edmunds could take a step forward and make it one of the strongest steps. It's really on Terrell Edmunds on if this group is one of the strongest groups. Because obviously we know Minkah Fitzpatrick is a elite safety already. But it's just up to Terrell Edmunds if he's going to take that step, just force a little more turnovers. But the good thing is the few things we did here at training camp was when we started this year, we thought Marcus Allen was at best a bubble player. And it just turns out that he had a really good camp. He played as a hybrid linebacker, safety, like Mark Barron was brought in to do, and so on and so forth. and he had a really, really good training camp. And he went from him being bubble player to him being like, yeah, this guy's gonna make the roster. So there's excitement with Marcus Allen too.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of variety here now on the defense with a lot more defensive backs playing in the NFL these days. Now you don't have to worry about, how are we going to get – it's no longer what happens if one guy gets injured. Now it's all of a sudden we could play Mike Hilton or Cameron Sutton or Sean Davis or Terrell Edmonds in some sort of combination. We don't have to use certain players, so that's something that's nice to see. The addition of Dobbs and Davis without any real cost to the team – those were two fantastic moves. A couple other moves to highlight, or rather guys that ended up making the team. Let's start first with the wide receiver Ray McCloud, formerly of the Buffalo Bills. He's going to be one of the primary kick returners, apparently. Kind of surprising that he was kept. I would have thought the Steelers would have brought in a guy like Deion Kane or Ryan Switzer instead of McCloud, but McCloud is the guy that has the roster spot for now anyways.
Yeah, it was shocking. He wasn't with the team for very long. It just seemed like a late addition kind of guy, and I really get a realistic shot at the roster. I thought Ryan Switzer, being so buddy-buddy with Ben and just how he was having a better camp from what I heard. I thought he was going to make it. I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised because I kind of wanted the best for Ryan Switzer, even though I didn't like his play from last year, but this was a surprise. Ray McCloud must have impressed with his kick returning in a short time because he immediately came in and got listed as a co-starter as a kick returner. So I'm thinking that was what pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, McCloud's been with the team since August 21st, which was, as of today, just 17 days ago. So that was pretty notable for him. And a couple others, there's the defensive tackle Carlos Davis, the Steelers' 7th-round draft pick, who didn't appear to be all that notable coming out of the draft, unseating Big Dan McCullers, who is one of the longest tenured players with the team, believe it or not. But I don't know if it's so surprising that he made it. I think that is a surprise. I think it's more surprising that he booted a guy like McCullers off the roster. I think that's where the big surprise is.
Yeah, it was just impressive. Like, of all the years that I thought that every year I feel like I've said Daniel McCullers needs to be cut. They need to improve the position. Daniel McCullers needs to be cut. They need to improve the position. We come into this year, come into the draft, I'm like, yeah, they need to improve the position, but they're probably not going to cut Daniel McCullers. Go into the draft, don't get a nose tackle until the 7th round. Okay, Daniel McCullers is guaranteed a spot. Go through camp. Carlos Davis is unnotable from any report. I can't even think of anyone saying anything about him. And I'm like, oh yeah, Daniel McCullers has to be guaranteed a spot because we don't even have a true nose tackle on the roster. They're converting Tyson Alualu to nose tackle. Then out of nowhere, they're just like, yeah, this is the year we choose to cut Dan McCullers. All right, I don't understand the Steelers. The way they work is so backwards sometimes and funny. It's like the 1 year where I wasn't saying cut Daniel McCullers. This was the 1 year that was ever going to happen. I am surprised. I really did not like Carlos Davis's team. I mean, if he impressed in camp enough, there's some pretty great talent. So, I'm sure the Steelers made the right choice.
Well, this is it ultimately just proves why I missed the preseason. Because I really want to see what they saw.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it's they're backwards, man. Like, remember I know we didn't make the roster this year, and I wasn't surprised, but like last year we obviously had Tazar Skipper, right? 5 sacks through 4 preseason games, ridiculous. Got cut outright. Like, I don't know what players have to do to actually make the roster for the Steelers. I don't know. I don't even know if we would have saw anything. This is what I'm trying to get at.
Another example being the whole Matt Wild, Jordan Berry thing from a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, Wild outperformed Berry, and they're just like, screw it, we're going to go with Berry.
Well, Berry finally fell. That was the most recent change to the roster. Jordan Berry was released today in favor of Dustin Colquitt, the recent Super Bowl champion with the Kansas City Chiefs. That name should be familiar to Steelers fans, as his father was a 2-time Super Bowl champion with the Steelers in the late 70s. Dustin became the 3rd member of the Colquitt family to earn a ring himself. His younger brother Britton won a ring with the Denver Broncos in the 2015 season on Peyton Manning's last ride there. And believe it or not, I can't remember, it's either their cousin or their uncle, Jimmy, was also a punter in the NFL for 1 year back in the late 80s. So this is a family that has a lot of punting pedigree. The Steelers saved some money by cutting Barry here. And Colquitt, a proven commodity. Even if it's just for a year, this is I like the move. I think this is a pretty significant upgrade.
Yeah, I like the move as well. I think Barry's always been inconsistent. I think the Steelers need at least a little bit more consistency from their punter. The punter's going to be average. I want him to be average all year. I don't want it to be really good games and then really miserable games and those last 4 weeks with Barry were very miserable after he's had such a great season to start.
And, you really think about the Steelers' punting situation. What has the one consistent thing about punters for Pittsburgh been over the past, 20 years almost? It's that they have been inconsistent. It's been a rotating, revolving door from Chris Gardocki to Mitch Berger, Paul Ernster, Daniel Sepulveda for a few years, but he was injured a lot. Matt McBriar, Zoltan Mesko,
Ryan Wing.
Brad Wing. Brad Wing.
I said Ryan. I meant Brad.
Drew Butler. There was Drew Butler, and then finally Jordan Berry in 2015. He had a couple solid years, but there were also a few years where he just wasn't that good. I don't know. With Berry, you always knew that he could do it, but like you said, he could just never put it together. And I hope he lands somewhere. And it is just such a strange phenomenon where the first 3 quarters of last season was a top 10 season in Steelers punting history, and then he played not only was he bad in the last 3 games, and really 4 games if you look back at that Cardinals game with the botched fake punt there, but it was so bad that it turned his great season into just an average one.
Yeah, it was really tough. That big punt, the shank versus Buffalo, early on, the fumble with the Ravens in the Ravens game. It was just tough for him. Really bad set of last few games.
So those were the major changes on the roster that have happened since the cutdown. On the practice squad, I'll run through it real quick. Devlin Hodges is one of the names that's expected to be there now that Josh Dobbs was reacquired. So the Steelers' quarterback room is in great shape. It's the same 3 guys that were on it at the beginning of the year. And Hodges, a guy that started 6 games last year, is on the practice squad. So that's about as ideal as it gets. A couple pair of running backs who have played in the NFL before, and Trey Edmonds and Wendell Smallwood. Wide receivers Deion Kane, who made a few big grabs last year, and Amara Darbo. Tight end Kevin Rader, who somehow sticks around all the time. A couple of offensive linemen, Anthony Coyle, Jerron Jones, and Derwin Gray, last year's 7th-round pick. Defensive lineman Henry Mondeau and Daniel McCullers does stay on the practice squad here. Outside linebacker Jaron Elliott, cornerback Trajan Bandy, and safeties Antoine Brooks Jr. and Curtis Riley, the aforementioned Riley, and punter Corliss Waitman. So just a handful of guys that didn't make the team for the cutdown that I wanted to mention real quick. Quarterback Paxton Lynch, you remember he was brought in midway through last season to be the number 3 quarterback. There were calls for him to play at the end of the year with Hodges being the only healthy quarterback besides him. Lynch is just a bust, and even though he has the talent, he's never been able to put it together. And I have to imagine this was his last shot.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make it on another team. I mean, the Steelers tried, and it's highly unlikely Lynch is going to really land anywhere else. I mean, I hope for the best for him, but I can't see it for the former first-round pick.
And now the next 3 guys are guys that have contributed to the team in some form or fashion over the last couple of years. First is running back Kareth White Jr., who I believe visited with the Colts today. This is a guy that was picked up later on in the year, along with Deion Kane from waivers, or from practice squads, I should say. And White produced a little bit of a pop in the running game for the Steelers when they needed it. And I think ultimately the Steelers are just replacing him with Anthony McFarland on the ground game, so his position became expendable. But, I think he has a little bit to offer.
I agree with Kareth White. I hope he finds a team. He should definitely find a practice squad, because I thought that when he played last year, he was really good for the Steelers. And, I mean, I wanted to see him play a little bit more. And so I'm a little disappointed he didn't make the Steelers practice squad. They decided to go with newer guy Wendell Smallwood, formerly of the Eagles and Redskins, but I think I would have preferred Kareth White, but it's just another factor of just another reason. Like, I didn't get to see training camp. I don't know what the Steelers saw. I didn't get to see preseason games. I don't know what the Steelers saw in this guy. It's just, so I'll have to trust their word that Wendell Smallwood outperformed Kareth White, where Smallwood deserved that practice squad spot over Kareth White.
Probably the biggest surprise of all, former Steelers receiver Ryan Switzer. Probably the biggest headline name, was released from the team and not signed to the practice squad. One of his relationship with Ben Roethlisberger duly noted. Switzer's career in Pittsburgh after they traded for him from the Oakland Raiders, now the Las Vegas Raiders. Kind of a tale of two seasons. He was probably a little overutilized 2 years ago, but was relatively efficient when asked to do so. And last year just struggled mightily without Ben Roethlisberger, a quarterback. And he offered almost nothing in the return game, where he offered not a ton 2 years ago, but enough to warrant a roster spot. And I just thought he was really disappointing last year. And while I'm sorry to see him go, I think that it is ultimately the right choice.
Yeah, it was just about time for that. It's just, I don't think he had a lot to offer compared to the other wide receivers in the. If Ray McLeod outperformed him in kick returning, which he offered nothing in kick returning, that's basically all the Steelers needed. So, I mean, I think that there's a chance he could return to the Steelers later. I think at the moment he's looking to see if he could find an active roster spot somewhere rather than go to a practice squad. But I could see him circling back to the Steelers for familiarity if he doesn't find a team that wants to put him on the active roster. I kind of find it that way. I don't think he's going. I think he could come back and sign with the Steelers practice squad. I don't think he's going to sign with any other team's practice squad. He's either going to an active roster or he's coming back to the Steelers on the practice squad.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think he's going to come back. I think we've got another Eli Rogers situation on our hands.
Yeah, but I don't think the fans like Switzer as much as they like Rogers.
No, that is a little different. I think Switzer could possibly make an appearance in next year's XFL if that ever happens, assuming he doesn't come back. I remember Deontay Spencer, I thought, outperformed him last year in the preseason too, and he was kept, which I think made it even more surprising that he wasn't retained this year.
Yeah. You have Spencer. I think Spencer made the roster again for the Broncos. Really confident.
Let me check this out. Deontay Spencer.
Yeah, we'll see him week two, yeah.
All accounts seem to suggest that he did make the team. So, good for him. And then last but not least is last year's Camp Darling. Probably the most impressive Camp Darling, if you will, that I think we've probably ever seen in Tuzar Skipper. And there have been some really good ones. I remember Mike Hilton's Camp Darling performance in 2017 actually led to a really good season and thus far a pretty solid career. But Skipper, his preseason appeared to be a flash in the pan. He got outright cut by the Steelers, like you said. Played a couple games with the Giants, was cut from them, and then was brought back to the Steelers, but was unable to make the team again this year. And ironically enough, it's like him and Jaron Elliott. There's only like one roster spot, and it's always the two of them battling for it. But this time it's Elliott that won the spot instead of Skipper last year.
Yeah, they elected to put Elliott on the active roster late last year. So, I mean, if it wasn't for Elliott being hurt, he probably would have stayed with the team throughout the entire year. Regardless, yeah, I'm not surprised. The team didn't seem sold on Tuzar Skipper. I wasn't shocked that he got cut, and he was one of the first three Steelers that we knew were cut, too.
Yeah, I guess it just goes to show you, he did play really well in the preseason, but the fact that he's been cut by the Steelers multiple times and he was cut by the Giants too, I think just shows you really all that you need to know about how good he really is. So it is disappointing to see because, man, for about 1 month there, he was the best defensive player in the league.
Yeah, that was wild, and they cut him then, so I'm not surprised they cut him now.
That's a guy that'll be an interesting trivia question about years down the line. Like, who was the guy that had 5 sacks in 4 preseason games, but only played in like 2 NFL games. So, all right, let's move on to some Steelers topics before we get into general NFL news and wrap this one up. The first big thing to talk about has to be Cameron Hayward. You know how the Steelers are, where they don't negotiate contracts during the season, and with the season just around the corner here, that meant there was a very limited amount of time for players on with 1 year remaining on their deals, including Cameron Hayward, to get a deal done. And he said himself today that he was preparing for a last ride with the Steelers prior to meeting with Art Rooney and having an extension here, a 4-year extension, a 5-year deal on top of his original contract here that hopefully should keep him in Pittsburgh for the rest of his career. The deal totals $75.1 million, which would include $65.6 million in new money. This is the highest average for a defensive player over the age of 30 in NFL history. So, all things considered, there were rumblings that the Steelers might not be able to keep him. And the Steelers, I guess we should just always have faith in Kevin Colbert and Art Rooney that they'll get the job done, and they sure did. It's really great to see Cameron Hayward get the contract extension that he deserves, and now we can put all that behind us, and now he can focus on trying to get a ring with the Steelers here.
Oh yeah, this deal was so great, and people really just you know who's a casual fan when people think this is a bad deal. The amount of guaranteed money in this deal, the player that is, the stats he puts up, this is a fantastic deal. The people will celebrate Kenny Clark getting $70 million a year. No, I'm sorry, not $70 million a year. $70 million over 4 years, and then we'll say that the Cameron Hayward getting 71 over 4 years is bad. To say Cameron Hayward playing in less games from like 2016 and doubling the sack totals and just blowing them out in every stat. Then in 2019, Cameron Hayward was a better player than DeForest Buckner and Chris Jones, and no one has problems with their deals. But this is a underpayment, and I will take it all the time. I love everything about this deal. It was so good, and I will take Cameron Hayward averaging $15 million over 5 years. That is a fantastic deal, and I'm glad the Steelers could get it done. I was really shocked with the guaranteed money. Guaranteed money was extremely low. I mean, and that makes it perfect because it is for a defensive player over the age of 30. So, I mean, by the end of it, Cameron Hayward could not be in his prime anymore. He could start coming down. It's because the Steelers like an easier out. I still love the deal because Cameron Hayward is in his prime currently. He's playing ridiculously well.
So, Austin, in terms of Pro Football Focus grades, Hayward graded second among defensive players with at least a minimum of 200 snaps last year. He ranked second behind Aaron Donald in overall defensive grade, and he finished third behind Mike Purcell and Calais Campbell in terms of run defense grade. And his pass rush grade was 8th among interior defensive linemen. So, I mean, this guy really is elite, and he's one of the best. And even at age 31, I still think he's got several really good years left, even if he doesn't get any better than what he is now. This guy is extremely important, not to mention the whole impact on the locker room. He's been a team captain for years now, and I'm very happy to see him hopefully stay in Pittsburgh the rest of his career, and hopefully he'll be able to age gracefully like a fine wine.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be fantastic. This should mean that his career is ending in Pittsburgh, assuming he doesn't get cut.
Yeah, but obviously that would hopefully be a long way down the line. So until then, obviously very happy to see this extension. Speaking of extension, reports from Jerry Dulac of I believe the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette said that he might not be the only Steeler that could be getting a new deal. So there's a lot of speculation as to who that could be. So running it quickly down the line here, the players that are set to become unrestricted free agents. What was that note you had? Cannot be extended due to what?
Franchise tag.
Oh, that would be Bud Dupree then, right?
Yeah, Bud Dupree is an unrestricted free agent next year, but he can't be extended due to the franchise tag being placed on him.
So anyone that could be would be Alejandro Villanueva, Cameron Sutton, Chris Wormley, James Conner, Jordan Dangerfield, Juju Smith-Schuster, Matt Filer, Mike Hilton, Tyson Alualu, Zach Banner, Joshua Dobbs, and Sean Davis. If I had to pick two guys that I think it would be most likely, I'd probably guess Filer or Banner, personally.
I am going to go with Alualu or Dangerfield, which I originally wasn't. My original thought was either Sutton or Hilton, but I switched off of that and was thinking more cheap because I think Hilton and Sutton would be dumb sign a contract right now, and Hilton would be pretty expensive. So I was thinking a little bit afterwards, and after seeing them name Jordan Dangerfield special teams captain, it made me think they might be working on a longer deal with him. They've also really shown to love Tyson Alualu, so I think that Alualu could be getting the extension.
I did not think when Alualu was signed that he was going to be playing possibly well into, what is this now, going to be his fourth year with the team. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's wild. He's played really well. He's been a solid depth piece.
And now he's going to be a starter, which is interesting. I was thinking Filer or Banner just because of the fact that they won't be overly expensive, and if you can get them on a relatively friendly deal like you were able to get Villanueva a handful of years ago, that could really help. And you know how Ben Roethlisberger is with making sure the offensive line is good. That's one other thing I wanted to consider too is Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think it's going to happen, but an extension with him wouldn't surprise me all that much either because he has such a high hit for a cap number next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he has some sort of extension to try to lower that number.
Yeah, man. I think that's possible too to lower that number. It's going to be interesting. I think that the least likely are Juju and Connor. Juju is just, don't think he's going to take a below market deal, and that's what it's going to take for the Steelers to be able to re-sign Juju because it's just likely not going to happen. And then Connor, I think, would just be a mistake with all his injury history. It would be better. I'm not saying the Steelers shouldn't re-sign eventually if they want to. I would just wait till after the season, see if he has a healthy season before thinking about doing that. But I think he likely walks as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. We talked about the wide receiver position before, how there's only been like 2 or 3 players that have gotten second contracts, so.
It just doesn't make sense when you draft so well. It's just, if you still believe in you being able to draft a wide receiver, it just doesn't really make sense to give wide receiver, when you have so many other players you need to address, it just doesn't make sense.
Especially because they draft at least one receiver almost every year, so they're constantly feeding that position.
And their hit rate is good, so you know.
All right, let's move on to the depth chart here. No huge surprises, just a couple notable things. The Steelers are going with sort of co-starters at 3 positions. The one that shouldn't be that surprising is kick returner. There's often 2 that return kicks. This time, the starters are Anthony McFarland and Ray McLeod. So those are 2 guys that have never done it before, meaning it's how many straight years that the Steelers have had different kick returners?
I'm fairly confident this means 23. Fairly confident.
Oh, so almost as old as me. I'll be turning 24 a week from today. So that gives myself perspective how long it's been since the Steelers had any consistency there. And they've been quite bad at it.
It's just not been, they can't find the guy. It seems like such a stupid thing to not have a good one for 23 years, but they just really can't find a guy that can sit there and stay there.
Other co-starters are at tight end with Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald, and at right tackle with Zach Banner and Chukwuma Okorafor. I think with the tight end position that was kind of expected, but the right tackle one is kind of interesting. I think that's some sort of gamesmanship for the New York Giants.
I was thinking the same exact thing, but before I get into that, I need to make a correction. It is 28 straight seasons that we've had a different kick returner, not 23. It's 5 years longer than I had. It is older than you.
Yikes.
Yeah, but anyhow, I agree. I think the Steelers know who's starting at right tackle and just want the Giants to really work for it. They don't want to give the Giants any extra notes. Want to make it even more difficult for them. So I think they know. Who do you think is winning it? Out of curiosity, who do you think actually won it?
You know, this is going to be kind of a 2-part answer. I think it's Banner, in part because I think they're planning to groom Okorafor to be the swing tackle this year, and next year he'll replace Villanueva at left tackle, if that makes any sense.
I didn't have the same reasoning, but I think Banner won it too. I didn't really have a thought on why. I just thought that Banner won it outright. It sounded like it. Like it just like there wasn't really any report that either one.
There was some sort of report on the NFL Network's morning show that Banner had won the job, but Tomlin didn't confirm that. So if you want to say there was any report, I guess you could say that, even though it wasn't exactly confirmed. But if anyone does have a lead, it would be Banner.
Interesting. Yeah, that's how I felt.
So I guess we'll find out for sure later on. The last bit of Steelers news is they named their team captains today. There were 5, including 2 first-time team captains. The offense is about as consistent as it gets with Roethlisberger and Pouncey. And on defense, Cameron Hayward retains his role there. And now there's a new captain in T.J. Watt. So congratulations to him. And Jordan Dangerfield, after being cut, I don't know, what it feels like 10 times over the first few years of his career, finally sticks to the roster this time and was rewarded by being named a team captain. He's always been a solid special teams ace, and good for him and TJ.
Yeah, man, this is all good, and I mean, Watt basically deserved it after the monster year he had last year, and coming on as a rookie pretty strong. So this is great for both guys.
Let's move on to NFL news. Just a couple things to talk about. Really, they both have to do with the New York Giants, and we'll talk more about them later on as we prepare for week 1. But they're expected to release former first-round pick DeAndre Baker from last year on account of the fact that he's facing 4 separate charges of armed robbery robbery with a firearm, I guess is the technical term. He's looking at 10 years to life in prison if he's convicted. So pretty incredible that not only that, they're going to cut a former first-round pick from just a year ago, but just all those charges too, which is just nuts.
So what a way to end an NFL career. He could have been a millionaire, but he just couldn't wait. Like, that's wild to me. And, another NFL player was involved, even though he didn't get charged. So he was, Quentin Dunbar was lucky, but I just don't understand what, the thought process was. Like, did they not think they were going to get caught? Did they think that the person they were robbing would just say, you know what, I got robbed. I'm not going to try and look into that. I'll just replace the stuff. I don't know, man. That's just wild to me that you throw your life away when you're already set up.
Just goes to show you that money or the prospect of money can't fix stupid.
100%.
And just something I wanted to make note of. I didn't realize that with Daniel Jones now stepping out of the shadow of Eli Manning, it's his team officially now. Colt McCoy is now the backup there. I didn't know that he was still around, but I'm happy to see that for him.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought the Giants liked Alex Tanney. I guess not. I don't really know much about Giants depth pieces, so I honestly had no idea Colt McCoy was even on their roster. There.
So so I think with that in mind, we can kind of move on to the first game of the season, right?
Sir.
So finally, our first taste of NFL action. We've been deprived of the preseason, so now we're jumping right into the first major game. And it's a rematch of the AFC divisional round between the Houston Texans and Kansas City Chiefs. Are there going to be fans allowed in this game?
I don't think so. Pretty sure no.
Even if there was, it probably was not going to be a significant amount. So we'll get our first look at what the NFL game will look like without many fans. So anybody who's watched, college football that isn't, SEC, or really if anyone's watched a Pitt football game the last few years, you probably will not be, you won't have to make too much of an adjustment. I'm sorry, I had to take a jab at my guys. I still don't know why they play at Heinz Field. They should play at a stadium on campus, but it's a discussion for another time. But in any case, the Texans and Chiefs are set to square off after that memorable playoff game just a few months ago. The Chiefs are getting 9 points at home, getting ready to raise the banner, if you will, celebrate their championship. So a 9-point spread and an over-under of 54.5. Where are you going right now?
The way I feel is that the Chiefs are just the better team. The Texans didn't get better in the offseason. They only got worse. Like, it's just, in my opinion, they didn't, as an overall, obviously there's places that that they did get a little bit better, but just overall, losing DeAndre Hopkins and replacing him with Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb just, didn't sit well with me. And just, as a whole, I think the Texans are a lot worse because of it. So I'm picking the Chiefs to cover the 9-point spread. And I still think that it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Any game with Patrick Mahomes is going to be so high-scoring. It's just how it's going to be. So I think it's going to go over the 54.5 points. Because I still like Watson. I have nothing wrong against Watson. I think he could put up points too. I think it's possible that the Chiefs win 48 to 28. So Watson still puts up points, but just I think that the Chiefs are just a way better team throughout their entire roster. How about you?
Yeah, even though I don't think that the Chiefs' defense is all that good, the fact of the matter is the Texans had an opportunity to improve and become one of those teams below the Chiefs as another challenger like the Ravens, but instead they got worse. They sent their best player away, and their running game is now anchored by David Johnson, who hasn't really been that good for the last few years. And like you said, they're trying to replace Hopkins with the by-committee approach. And as far as I know, their offensive line still isn't great, right?
Nah, their offensive line is still trash.
And their defense is pretty much the same as it was last year, which yielded, 50-something points to the Chiefs in 3 quarters?
Yeah, that was absolutely rough. I mean, they're starting Charles, I don't know how to say his last name, it's Omenhue at defensive end now. That's what it looks like. You know who I'm talking about?
No, that still doesn't make me feel like the Chiefs won't score more than 40 on them.
It shouldn't have. I was just saying they had one change that I really know of. They still got Zach Cunningham. They drafted Blacklock down the middle. Still got J.J. Watt. I don't feel like they made many changes.
Yeah, I still don't feel good about it. I mean, in terms of PFF grade, by the way, I have a part-time job with Pro Football Focus, so that's why I'm pulling up these stats. So not to gloat or anything, I'm just I have these stats at the ready, so I feel like I should use them if I have the opportunity to, right?
Feel like you should. You put in the work to get them.
Yeah, right.
Inside scoop.
So they graded 24th overall in total defense last year. Ironically enough, just in front of the Chiefs. But I mean, the Chiefs have the ring, so I guess they can talk,
Yeah, that's how it be.
So I'm very excited for the game, even though I don't really have much of a particular interest in either team going into this one. I will enjoy watching the Texans get slaughtered because I don't like Bill O'Brien at all.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be funny, dude. He ruined that team. Even if he loses, that team is going to be ruined.
Yeah, I mean, they traded how many draft picks? I mean, they've mortgaged the future for so long.
Yeah, dude. It's absolutely wild.
Well, until next time, I think we're all set. We'll be back talking about the Steelers and Giants later on in the week, and it'll be great. It's finally a football week here, Austin. We finally made it.
Yeah, man. It's exciting. You're going to be able to watch Thursday night, or are you busy?
As far as I know, I'll be able to watch. Yeah, I should be able to.
I will unfortunately be at work, but I'm going to try and watch anyway.
You won't call off.
What?
You won't call off.
Whoa, you're right. I need money.
Dang, I tried, but all right. Well, in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com, and check out our various social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and obviously feel free to search and find us on SoundCloud and YouTube as always. Thank you for joining me, Austin. It's good to get back in the saddle here, and I'm looking forward to the start of the NFL season. But in the meantime, thank you as always for listening. And have a terrific day, and we'll be back later in the week. So take care.
Take care.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.